Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Seer Mother Podcast. And I am so excited to be here today. And this afternoon, I have with me Dr. Iyanu Odebode. I'm going to have Dr. Iyanu introduce himself. Dr. Iyanu, how are you today?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited to see you. I know we've been trying to do this for quite a bit.
I know. Good to be here and good to see the podcast really pushing forward. Really exciting stuff and really exciting times as well when the message that you share sort of needs to go out. So excited to see that and see you pushing on that front.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iyanu. Would you tell our audience, our listeners, a little bit about yourself before we go into the subject for the day?
Yeah. So my name is Iyanu. Been in the technology space for over 20 years. Lots of my focus has been in the artificial intelligence space. And I've been leading the responsible use of technology across a variety of industries. We have technical industry, we are local government industry, just a whole bunch of industries. So what we focus on doing is helping companies navigate the use of AI and the adoption of AI so that they can stay in compliance, so that they can continue to build and grow without being afraid that they run into some, not just technical issues, but issues with their customers and issues with, the government and things of that nature.
Interesting. Such a great work that you do out there. And for my audience can understand why I have Dr. Iyanu on this podcast today. With the kind of work that he does and being a person of faith, I believe that Dr. Iyanu has some insight and a lot of interesting tips for us as parents, even as individuals, as adults. He talked about responsible use of technology. And today on the podcast, our title is Raising Discerners in a Digital Age. And basically, we're talking about raising children with all the information that they need for a responsible use of technology. You know, people were raising children in a world where information is everywhere, but the truth is not always obvious for our children. And unfortunately, there have been incidences that I personally don't want to recall because it breaks my heart just learning that these innocent children are so exposed, and as parents, we're not doing enough to help them. And so that's why I have Dr. Iyanu here. So, Dr. Iyanu, by way of starting, how do you want to frame this challenge that parents are facing?
So I call it like information overload and also disinformation. So both really sort of playing a part here. So information overload means we're consistently fed with a lot of information.
Okay.
There was a lawsuit on Facebook very, very recently. And the lawsuit was around how they were suggesting that, the way that the technology has been built to create some sort of addiction. And so a lot of these technologies that we use today are being studied by psychologists, and those psychologists even help some companies to basically figure out what are the best ways to get people addicted to these technologies. And so, of course, we have, bad people and good people, I say. And you might have a gun and you can use it to either like maybe kill an animal, or you can use it to kill people or kill yourself. So it's gone, but the way it's used differently, right? And so essentially what we're now seeing is people are now taking these tools and it's feeding their addictions, it's feeding their problems, it's feeding they're getting some level of satisfaction from the use of the tool because it feeds one addiction or the other. And so on one end, you have the bullying issue, which happens on social media, where you have like individuals that are being sort of bullied on the platform. They share their images or share their pictures, and someone says, you don't look nice, you don't look beautiful, you don't look... So bringing their morale down. On the other end, you have, individuals who have maybe a sexual addiction or sexual issues, and they use the pictures that they see on Instagram to get whatever sexual satisfaction that they are looking for because now that system sort of feeds that addiction. And so we have all of that going on. And this is what our family, our kids are exposed to.
Wow.
Now, the challenge is many parents don't know this,
You know,
right? So you see
honestly,
on
Dr.
the phone.
Iyanu, you are just hitting the nail on the head. And
Yeah.
I'm interested in that perspective about psychology being introduced into the responsible use, because you mentioned parents now. The issue with us is that we narrow all our focus on screen time. All we want to try
Mm-hmm.
to is to reduce screen time. But I'm hearing you talk about exposure. The souls
Yes.
of our children are being exposed
Yes.
because you mentioned someone having some sexual addiction and wanting to derive satisfaction with what they are seeing. So, do you think
Yes.
that parents are underestimating the impact of digital exposure?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, like a lot of people are profiting from this specific system.
Sad.
So, as you can imagine, there are people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month by indecently exposing themselves to, technology. There was a time I think Facebook had a group within its organization that was focused on basically just deleting the
Content.
and they said from what I heard, some people had to go for therapy after that, right? Because the kind of exposure
My God.
that you have working with those kind of images creates a terrible damage to your system. Now, I can imagine the people who are actually watching it on a day-to-day basis. And what do we say about that?
I mean, this is dangerous, and it's
Yep.
unfortunate that it has gotten to this extent. Not too long ago, I was reading the Morning Brew. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And, they were talking about open AI saying something about adult content. I think all of
Yep.
that is hot. Do you know anything, and how is that going?
Yeah, so you see, I'll say this, when you look at a specific technology or a specific tool,
Mm-hmm.
look at the folks who are leading it, right? Look at the people who are basically in the aim of affairs driving
Forefront, yeah.
some of these tools. So I think, yes, there were some conversations around that. I don't know how far they've pushed into the implementation of those. However, this is the struggle. The struggle is they say, well, everybody should have their own free will to be able to do anything.
No.
So because of that, it's your choice to do X or do Y or do Z. So
Even with children, it's a child's choice to do X or Y or Z.
you see, so that's the thing, because that's the thing we have, and this is where we have to be very, very vigilant, because a lot of these tools have their terms and conditions.
Okay.
So they create all
Educate
these
us.
different, yeah. So they create all these systems, and then they create what their terms and conditions are. Based on their terms and conditions, that's where these companies protect themselves.
Wow.
Right. And so we have to be careful. For example, on Zoom, when we start start a Zoom meeting,
Yes.
there's something that says, "Oh, you agree with all the terms," and we just click and just say, "Okay," and boom, we're in. But if Zoom was saying they were recording you, you've not read the terms and condition. So at the end of the day, Zoom then keeps all your videos, keeps all of those information because you signed and agreed to
And
the
agree
terms
to their
and
terms and
conditions.
conditions.
Yeah, exactly. So some of these platforms, they'll say, "Are you 18? Are you above 18?" And if the child says yes,
Then
who
those
is to
people are
judge that the child
exonerated.
is 18? Then they are exonerated, right? And so there needs to be, for this kind of issues to be fixed, there needs to be, and I know some groups are already doing this, where like before you jump in, you can also verify yourself via your face. So
Okay.
don't just say you are X or Y or Z. We have your age. Can you verify with your face?
Just like we would show our ID cards at the store if we were trying to buy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Even with my phone now, like before I access my phone, I have my, like facial recognition and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. So now what parents really need to start really doing is, being aware of the tools or the specific platforms that their children are mostly on. Every parent needs to be educated on how to blacklist some websites and whitelist some others. And so if the site is not included in that specific list, the child shouldn't have access to that specific,
Tell us more.
So there are platforms like Netflix and all of Netflix, some of the video platforms where YouTube, where they actually have, some guidance on how to, block people from really not watching what they're not supposed to watch. Because when someone uploads those crazy videos, they have to say, are you targeting kids or you're not targeting kids? It's part of the you see that question in tax, right? Exactly. And so if they access through that platform, they won't have access to those set of videos that are, a mess. So that's one. The other piece is, on every browser. So, you have Safari, you have Chrome, on all the different individual browsers. There are ways that you can put an add-on or create through the settings, create the list of sites that you want your kids to be able to watch. And so you use it. So some of them come as an extension, some of them come as, to make it easier for parents, I would say the best thing to do is identify what browser you're using. Are you using Microsoft Edge? Are you using Chrome? I don't want to share about Chrome and then someone who is using Edge says, oh, I can't get it to work on Edge. So identify the browser first. Edge, Chrome, Safari, Firefox. Identify your browser. Then go on YouTube and say, suggest how to create whitelist links on my browser.
Okay.
And then follow the instruction that YouTube gives you. We can do another session where I actually would share my screen.
Okay.
I'll walk through each of the browsers. So I'm truly happy to do that.
I will be delighted because honestly, what I'm hearing you say here is parental education first. Just like Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6 to 7, I like the Message translation. It talks about, getting these things into you first and then to your children. Because at times we're talking about parents that know next to nothing about things. So
zero. Exactly. When my kids started using the laptop, I remember their mom saying to them, your dad is a computer wheezy, so it will get all the way down to your browser. So basically, I can check the history, the browsing history for my kids. I can check what they watched last night, what they watched 2 nights. I have the ability to check that. Yes, exactly. Not to talk about checking their kids, exactly. And so those are the things that you want to be aware of first. And then, most of the time, parents come in late into the journey. It's always good when you come in very, very early into the journey. The habit has been fed, and now you're dealing with a different problem, right? It's now an addiction at this point, right? So you have to first deal with the addiction first before you go back and then start dealing with like the root cause of the issue, right? It's almost like stop the bleeding and then go back and then. But if you started with the first, say, hey, here are the things that, we had this conversation with our kids. Here are the things that you need to be aware of while you go out. A guy might walk up to you and ask you a variety of questions. You don't know the intent of what the questions they're asking you. Refer them to your parents. 1. 2, when you're online, even if you're on so my kids do homeschool, and so they go on a platform and they have to interact with people, right?
Yeah.
Here are people you should interact with. Here are people that the moment you see them going in this direction, you should be careful, right? So all of those, that education then needs to be done first, so that now if you see any derailment from that, you can now figure out, okay, what exactly is the child's issue? Is it something that needs to be addressed? Is this some other things that need to be addressed from a root issue? Or is it a situation where it's all turned into a personal issue that needs to be fixed first before they start using the technology?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Iyanu. So I hear a lot of parent education and then education of children and then starting early. Now, because you are very AI savvy, I want to ask you, what do you think are the biggest dangers when it comes to artificial intelligence?
So here's the thing, now before, you see, this is the funny thing. So before now, we have all these complaints, right? We see all these issues that we're having right now. So you can imagine how AI is going to accelerate those issues, right? Because now with AI, acceleration of the problem. So we're going to see an increase. If we do not equip families to do the right thing, we're going to see an increase in this epidemic, right? Where now you have systems that are being trained on the data that are available online to target young kids, to target, young children in school, to target teens, to target, right? Now you have generation of AI. Now you can scrape the internet and get information and use that information, in a malicious way to target the wrong set of people. So we're going to see an acceleration of that, right? However, I think we can also control it, right, with AI. So I say the same tool that can be used to create problems. Yeah. The same tool that can be used to create problems can be used to solve problems. And so, I mean, how do we control the situation? One, I think, for example, I was looking at how is it possible to create, systems that are completely, compliant, which means you don't have to, how do I say, you don't have to do a whitelisting, you don't have to check all the different browsers, you don't have, some people say, oh, that's just too much work, right? So how do you have a system where all of these things you can actually see it from maybe a dashboard, right? You don't have to set it up or anything, you just see it from your dashboard. AI can make that possible, but someone has to build it, so maybe something I could think about. But
Maybe Dr. Iyanu
someone has
has
to
to
build this
build
kind of
it.
system, you know. And if you build the system, is that something that parents will be willing to pay for? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that when it comes to responsible stewardship of children, I think any parent, I mean, right now, if I had a child in this age now that was, still elementary, middle school age, be willing to subscribe to that kind of platform because this is biblical stewardship at its peak and it is no longer optional. You just talk another area that I think we need to look into is
Mhm. So yeah.
I am so sorry, Dr. Yan.
So you wanted to go with the last question first?
Yeah, I
The
was
last question
saying that how has technology changed the way children form their identity and beliefs?
So when you have some time, you should read a book called Hooked.
Okay.
That book basically speaks about how when they create these technologies, they create them with the idea of helping people form habits. Yes. And
It's me
so
opening my
they
eyes
basically,
wide.
yeah, exactly. So they would say, what are the things that we need to do to make people stick, take a look, when we, for example, if you're using Instagram and you stared at a picture more than 2 minutes, more than likely you get similar pictures when you go to your explore page. Some of these tools, if you said, hey, I'm looking to, find a girlfriend or
Yeah.
boyfriend,
Yeah.
it will hear what you're saying
Okay.
and it will feed you with content around how to find a boyfriend or how to find a girlfriend, right? So there are two things. There's those that walk into the system
Mm-hmm.
with they're already like the problem, right? So you already deal with situations and you're already struggling with something. You're struggling with an addiction, you're struggling with porn, you're struggling with, and then you walk in
To
into
that
the
kind of
system and it just helps to amplify the problem. And then there are people who don't even know,
They are totally
that
ignorant.
they are totally ignorant, right? They walk in and they just need the first image.
There.
And then that first image becomes, oh, okay, oh, wow, this is another image. Oh, wow, this is another image. And like the Bible says, right, desire leads to lust, lust leads to
Yes.
sin, right? Death. So the desire starts first. Once you start getting, fed with lots of things that are, amplifying that desire, before you realize it, you start to lust. When lust starts getting, then you start to sin, and then sin, destruction.
This is really serious, Dr. Iyanu. I honestly feel really bad for our children. Technology is good, artificial intelligence has its advantages, but this exposure just means that we have a lot more to do in this age as
Yes.
parents
Yes.
than we've ever had. It means that we cannot be complacent. It means that as a parent, we have to be informed. We have to know what is going on. We can't afford to just parent in a kisira kind of way, and we need to start teaching our children discernment. Look at what you just talked about, the hook. I know I've heard it before, even though my eyes were just kind of wide, just because, again, it's so sad to think about it. But because when people start talking about algorithms, they say, oh, the algorithm will favor what you've watched, and then it keeps bringing that back to your feed. So this is information that every parent needs to understand. So how do we now balance protection versus preparation?
That's a very, very good question. So, and that's the reason why I think, one, it's really critical for parents to, once you have an understanding, to have the conversation with the kids. This is what is out there. This is what you're prone to experiencing.
Yeah.
These are the issues that you need to be sort of protected from.
Yeah.
This is not the time for you to say, oh, man, if I spoke about what the kids should be aware of, growing up, where we grew up, like when they want to talk about sex, they would use a different, they'll use a different
they
word.
kind of code it. They code
They'll
it.
kind of code it because they think that you wouldn't know, This time, no, you can't code it.
Okay.
You have to be very, very, very clear.
Explicit.
What explicit? Yeah, this is what the issue is. This is the consequence of the action here, and you have to ask the kid, what are they going to do themselves to be able to make that happen? Because you don't want to take the ownership of doing what is right when they're supposed to actually own the right thing to do. So what does that mean? It's important that you don't just instruct. It's important that you help the kids understand that they are taking the ownership of their destiny by the decisions that they make towards getting to their goal. What do you want to be in the future? What are the things that you see might hinder you from getting to these places? Well, there might be other things that you have not seen that I might be able to share with you. Here are a couple of things. Have you had this experience before? As someone walked up to you and asked you, oh, do you look beautiful? As someone walked up to you and asked you, have you ever thought what was their intent when they asked those questions?
Wow.
Now you start getting them to think, right?
So
And
we're
then you say,
teaching
okay.
discernment here. We're teaching real discernment.
That's why I like the topic, because basically it's not just about like, hey, I'm going to shut them down from doing X, Y, and Z. It's like, I'm going to help you take responsibility for your action. Ultimately, you're going to have to answer to God on how you lived your life. Now, if you have a problem with self-control, I will help you.
Yeah.
I will seize your phone. I will take your computer.
Yes.
If we had a conversation, you said you're going to do this and you refuse to do it, I'm going to hold you accountable because you said it, I didn't. And these are the consequences for your action. There are certain games that, like, for example, the Grand Theft Auto. When I was younger, I used to love Grand Theft Auto, right? But Grand Theft Auto, in between the cars driving, you see, an obscene, image of a lady walking, past the highway, or a lady walking into the club, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. Now you want to start paying attention. Like, okay, what games are you playing? Is there anything you think that we should be aware of with these games? Anything that is making you feel a specific type of way? Oh, I saw it. You're not playing this game again. No.
We're so quick. We're so quick to do that.
I'm so quick to do that because basically, when I was stopped from doing stuff, I got more curious about why it is that, because I just didn't understand. I just didn't understand why you're stopping me from
why behind the instructions. You didn't understand
why.
why
You understand what I'm
behind the
saying?
instructions.
Yeah. So we want to be very, very clear about that. I'm grateful that I still had that level of protection. My kids, my parents shielded me from all of that. Okay. I'm grateful because I didn't realize the importance of what they were doing until
after. Yeah.
But while they were doing it, I was just like, I don't understand. What exactly are you talking about?
When they are out of the house, you sneak back to the very thing they asked you not to go check out, and then you want to dig deep. So there is a deep spiritual layer that I'm hearing here. Yes. Because in order for our children to recognize the truth, to be able to discern, we must teach them to ask themselves, is this true? Is this godly? Is this wise? Exactly. You know how the Bible says, whatsoever things are true, godly, of good virtue. Yep. If there be any virtue or praise, think on these things. So we need to literally break it down. There's no coding. You mentioned, look at what you mentioned, for example, because we're not often very thorough amidst our busy schedules. I don't know about that game. I was never a gamer. Yep. As a matter of fact, there was no games. When I was younger, we watched do your thing and so on and so forth. But you raised a very important point when you mentioned that. So it's a car race game, but in the middle of the race, there's an obscene scene where an inappropriately dressed lady
has to walk on the streets.
Many parents don't catch that. So I'm hearing a lot of intentionality, Many parents, very few parents catch that. I remember, and I don't want to demean any specific TV show or program or something, but I remember this cartoon. It was the character used to be in yellow. I forgot now. But I forgot, but let me just say what I want to say. So that character used to curse when my daughter was younger. And a lot of parents, they used to, allow children to watch that specific, I forgot the name. It was like a yellow, I forgot the name. Well, but whatever happened, I happened to have listened intently one day and I just heard a cuss word and I was like, this is it. And I had to have that conversation with my daughter. I'm like, okay, we can't watch. And then I changed to Buzz the bear, Things are very serious. And I think that a lack of identity makes our children vulnerable. Because when a child knows who they are and they understand their value, then they will be able to understand why these things are helpful.
Exactly. I think that identity, that initial identity, knowing who they are. I've been in the store where my daughter would approach someone and say, hey, why are you doing this way? Why are you wearing this way? Why are you putting this on? And she was just 8 while she was doing that. And then there was once the individual says, I know I'm not a good example to you right now.
No.
And so teaching, like you're absolutely right, teaching that is really, really critical. Now, even in these cartoons are being fed things that don't have any biblical precedence. And they are being fed that somewhat casually. So you wouldn't be able to tell unless you really pay very, very close attention. And so it's really, really critical not just to say, oh yeah, you can watch it. What are you watching? How is it going to help you? How is it going to help you grow? How is it going to, if you see your kid beginning to hide, you give them a phone and they were not hiding, and all of a sudden they're on the phone and then they're having to protect themselves, and then you say, what are you hiding?
Yeah.
But if you're in a family where you all are hiding things anyways, then you already created the problem.
Yes.
Right? So we policy in this house where nothing is hidden. My wife cannot have my phone. My kids can have my phone.
I love that.
And so if you have that kind of policy, then you're like, we're all being transparent here. What are you hiding?
I love it. I love it. Dr. Iyanu, I really think that we have to have a part 2 of this episode.
Absolutely.
We want to keep it short. That way people can get through the entire episode. But you're raising very, very critical issues here. Like they say, charity begins at home. If there are secrets between a father and a mother, then a child automatically, you've role modeled secrecy, and you're going to see them walk in that line. So if we don't shape their identity, the world is going to assign an identity to them, and it behoves on us to help them shape their identity through the whys. Why am I saying let's not watch that? Why am I saying let's not go to that website? So parents need to understand, forward thinking, why our children shouldn't do some of these things, and they need to pay more attention, because I'm just so excited about that particular illustration, that example you gave about a car. We're just going to think, oh, it's just a car race game.
Mm-hmm.
What a child sees, what they hear, what role does voice, sight play in their identity? These things come back. Image are very vivid, and we think it's all over once the child puts down the console, they are done playing the game. We think that's the end of it. But we have the deceiver. When the child is alone, in the quietness of their spirit, in the quietness of their they are reliving, replaying these images.
Exactly. Same thing with Mortal Kombat, right? There's a game called Mortal Kombat. And while I was young, I would play the Mortal Kombat game with my brothers. Would play the Mortal Kombat game. It's just, it sounds like a casual fighting game, right? And stuff like that. Then, you get into an altercation with your brother. I mean, we didn't do fist fighting, but then all the moves from the game starts coming to your mind, and you're like, oh, I might try this. I might trying it out on your sibling. And before you realize it, you killed somebody, or you messed up someone's jaw, or you messed up, and then the child grows up, and then they say, oh, he gets angry very easily. Well, when he was playing those games, well, just what were you doing? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we're going to wrap up here, because I think we're about 45 minutes into this. And like I said, I want to keep it short. We're going to have a part 2. But what is your closing message to parents that might be overwhelmed about use of technology in this digital age? What is your closing message?
I know that this is something that you're aware of as well. So and I am grateful for the kind of your podcast. I can say this without mincing words about it. First is pray. Pray, like literally commit this into God's hand. I'm not saying just commit your entire ways into God's hand. Like ask God, like pray to God, like God, I have my daughter Joy, my son Isaac, Sam, John. God, reveal to me anything. Yeah, reveal to me anything that I'm supposed to be aware of as a parent. Reveal it to me. That's number 1. Number 2 is take them out individually and have conversations with them. Find out what they love, what they like doing, and stuff like. But don't just find out what they love, what they don't, what they like doing. What are the things that they should be careful of that they might not necessarily be thinking about? Get them thinking about it before the world teaches them what to think about it. And then 3, once you've done that, ask them how you might help them to become better. Yes, even though you know how you could, but
you are making them own it, like you said.
Own it. Yes, let them take ownership of that decision. It's like, okay, here are the other things that I can add to that list. What do you think about it? Yeah, I like that one, Mom. Thanks for bringing that up. Oh, I like that one, Dad. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, and make them, we have made our daughter say, hey, here are the things that we're not going to do. You're going to sign it. We're going to hold you accountable for what
So
it is that
basically, we
you
have a
decided to do.
contract. We have a
You
digital
have a you have
usage
a digital
contract. Yeah,
exactly. With our daughter, we signed she had a purity ring, which means, I would not do this. I would not do this. I would not do this. I
I
would not
like
do
that.
this. I would not do this. And we bought her a ring, and that ring is a sign that there was a time we had a conversation about this. This is what it is that you decided you're not going to do. So those are the best place to start.
This is so educative, inspiring. Thank you so much, Dr. Iyanu, for coming. Like I said, I'm sure there are a lot of parents listening to us that really want the practical aspect of some of the things
Yes.
that you share.
Yes.
And so we're definitely going to have a part 2, raising discerning children in this digital age. But in closing, I want to say to all our viewers, we all need to understand that we're not just raising children. We're raising voices, we're raising leaders, we're raising
Yep.
the future. And discernment is no longer optional for us as parents, it's survival. So we all need to
Absolutely.
step up our game and ensure that we're not just preparing these children, we're protecting them, we're giving it our best shot. Because again, going back to how we started, you talked about the psychological intent of the producers of some of these things, and to think that there are people feasting, making money out of things that are destroying children, and we
Exactly.
also
Terrible.
need to fight back. So I want
Yes.
to encourage everyone. Dr. Iyanu has mentioned several, and thank you, Dr. Iyanu, for being very open with us. He just mentioned the purity ring. I never heard of it. Maybe if my daughter was younger, I could have done that, But thank you for the tips you've given us on this episode. And we're going to be looking forward to a second episode where you will be able to share screen and literally walk us through some of the things we can do to protect our children in this digital age. But in the meantime, I encourage everyone, start with those conversations. If your child is old enough to get a phone, to have access to technology, then they are old enough for these conversations. Please, like Dr. Iyanu has said, don't allow people to tell them, don't allow the world to shape them, shape their identity. Dr. Iyanu, it's been good having you, and thank you again for coming.
Same. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I look forward to calling you back for part 2 of raising children in a discerning children, not just children, in this digital age.
Yep.
God bless you.
I
Bye-bye.
can't wait. Thank you. God bless you too, ma. Yes, ma. Bye.